My affair resulted in my partner being hospitalized while attempting to care for my husband. Greetings, Reddit. I have typically refrained from sharing my personal matters in this forum, but I find myself in need of support and do not know where else to turn. I feel overwhelmed and the burden of my situation is becoming increasingly difficult to bear. I recall some of the advice offered by others in the past, and I regret not heeding it sooner. Thus, I am reaching out for assistance, hoping that articulating my thoughts may provide me with some clarity. My name is Lily, and I am a 30-year-old woman. I have been with my husband Brian for what seems like a lifetime. We began our journey together as teenagers, and since then, we have been inseparable. He is my high school sweetheart, and we have been married for approximately 5 years. Given the numerous challenges we have faced, it feels as though our marriage should span a longer duration. However, such is the nature of life. Together we have 2 children, a 7-year-old and a 6-year-old, who are the greatest joys of my life. Honestly, if it weren't for them, I don't even know where I'd be mentally right now. Being a mom is the one thing that keeps me grounded, especially with everything that's going on between Brian and me. Here's the thing, Brian is one of those men you read about in fairy tales. He's always been the romantic type, the guy who would show up with flowers for no reason or plan a spontaneous trip just to make me smile. He's the type who put family first, always, and in the beginning I was all about that too. I loved being his priority, his center of attention. But over time things changed. I changed things between us, have been rocky for a while now, and honestly I can't pinpoint exactly when it started going downhill. Maybe it was after we had the kids, or maybe it was when I started feeling like something was missing. Don't get me wrong. Brian is a good man. He's always been there for me and the kids, always supportive and caring. But somehow I started feeling suffocated by all of it, the perfection, the predictability. I can't explain it, but I felt like I needed something more, something different. And that's where the trouble really began. I feel so bad that I did this to Brian. I said he was always the amazing type, the kind of guy people would get jealous of. You know, he's the guy who would show up to every parent-teacher meeting, make breakfast on the weekends, and never miss a birthday or anniversary. The kind of guy that was always just there, steady, reliable, the rock of our family. He took care of us in every way, and yet I fucked it all up. I don't even know where it all went wrong. It wasn't like I woke up one day and thought I'm going to blow up my life. It was more subtle than that. I started to feel like something was missing. The thing is, I know how cliché that sounds. How many times have we heard someone say I'm bored in my marriage? But it's the truth, I got bored. I mean, I've been with Brian all my life since I was a kid, really. I never had a chance to see what else was out there. And that nagging thought just kept getting louder in my head. Like maybe I needed to explore to see what I was missing. I don't know why that urge hit me all of a sudden. It wasn't like Brian had changed. He was still the same amazing guy doing everything right, but somehow that made it worse. He was too good, too predictable, too perfect. And I know that sounds ridiculous. Who complains about someone being perfect? But I felt suffocated by it, like I was stuck in this perfect little life that I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. I could never face Brian with those feelings. I mean, how do you even say something like that to the person who's done everything for you? I knew he would never agree to any kind of change in our relationship, opening things up, dating other people, hell, even just talking about the idea of it would crush him. He's too traditional, too committed to the idea of us. So I did the only thing I could think of. I tried to push the feelings down to pretend they didn't exist. But that didn't work. The feelings got stronger, and ignoring them just made me more restless, more distant. And then I met Mike. Mike was different. He was someone I met through work. At first it was innocent. We talked during breaks, have coffee together, the kind of thing you don't think twice about. But something clicked between us. It wasn't immediate, but over time those little coffee breaks turned into something more. We started smoking together after work, spending longer and longer hours, just talking deep conversations, the kind that make you forget the time. And before I knew it, we were full on having an affair. I honestly don't even remember how it escalated. One day we were just friends, and the next we were sneaking around, stealing moments wherever we could. It feels like such a blur now, like I can't even pinpoint when it crossed the line. But it did. I regret it. Now, of course, I regret all of it, but back then it felt exciting. I didn't feel bored anymore. I didn't feel like something was missing because I had it. Whatever. It was that I had been craving. I felt alive again, like I had rediscovered a part of myself that I'd buried under the weight of being a wife and mother, but it wasn't real. That's the worst part. It wasn't real. And deep down, I think I knew that all along. Mike wasn't ever going to be my future, but I let myself believe in the fantasy even for just a little while. And now here I am with my entire life hanging in the balance and I don't know what the hell to do. But then the longer Mike and I were together, the more things started to shift. What started as this exciting secret fling quickly became something else, something darker. Mike became possessive, really possessive. At first, it was little things like him, texting me more often, wanting to know where I was all the time, even when I wasn't with him. I told myself it was cute, that maybe he was just really into me, that it was flattering. I mean, here was this guy who couldn't get enough of me, right? But it didn't stop there. It escalated. Mike started questioning everything I did. If I said I couldn't see him because I had to be home with Brian, he'd make these little passive, aggressive comments like, "Oh, so you're choosing him over me, or I thought we were more than that." At first, I'd brush it off, try to keep the peace. I didn't want to make things worse, so I'd assure him that it wasn't like that. I just had to keep up appearances for the kids, for Brian, for us. But over time it became clear that Mike wasn't just jealous. He was possessive. It was like in his mind I belonged to him, despite the fact that I was married to someone else, and it wasn't just about Brian. Mike didn't want me to have any part of my life that didn't include him. He didn't like me. Spending time with friends and even family gatherings became a source of tension between us. If I had to go to a family event and couldn't see him, Mike would sulk, act like I was betraying him. Just by doing normal things in my life, I was constantly walking on eggshells trying to keep him from blowing up or getting mad. I didn't know how to end things with him. By the time I realized how toxic it had become, it felt too late. I kept thinking that if I tried to break it off, Mike would do something drastic like tell Brian about us, or worse, blow up my entire life. He had this way of making me feel like he was in control, like he could ruin me if I crossed him. And the truth is, I was scared of that. I was terrified that if I tried to leave, he'd destroy everything I had said. I kept trying to convince myself that he wasn't that bad, even though deep down I knew he was. I told myself that it was just a phase, that maybe he was just insecure and things would get better if I reassured him enough. But they didn't. If anything, they got worse. Mike started talking like he owned me, like my life, my choices, everything I did was somehow his business. It was like he forgot that I had been with Brian for years, that Brian was my husband. Mike didn't seem to care about any of that in his mind. My marriage was just some temporary obstacle. He truly believed that Brian was just a placeholder, that I was going to leave Brian for him eventually, and that he just had to be patient. Mike had this delusion that I'd someday divorce Brian and we'd ride off into the sunset together like some twisted version of happily ever after. The reality was I never had any intention of leaving Brian. That wasn't what this affair was supposed to be about. I wasn't looking to end my marriage. I just wanted something more. But Mike had convinced himself that our affair was more than just a fling, more than just a temporary escape for me. He acted like I owed him something, like my future belonged to him, and the more time passed, the more suffocating it became. There were days when I wanted to just come clean to Brian, tell him everything, and let the chips fall where they may. At least that way, I wouldn't feel so trapped. But the idea of Mike blowing up my entire world was too terrifying, so I stayed. I kept juggling this impossible situation, stuck between the life I had and the one I'd never truly wanted with Mike, and I kept telling myself that maybe, just maybe, things would work themselves out. But deep down I knew I was only fooling myself. Mike always wanted me to be with him, only with him. He didn't even want me to have sex with Brian anymore. Yes, it was that bad. He actually thought he had the right to dictate what went on in my marriage. Looking back, I don't even know how I let it get that far. But like I said, the fear of Mike blowing up my world kept me frozen in place. I knew that he could, and I was terrified, so I stayed. Until Brian found out. I guess he'd been suspecting for a while now that I think about it. There were so many red flags. I was jumpy all the time, constantly changing the passwords on my phone and making excuses about it being for security reasons. Sometimes I'd turn off my location tracking and tell him it was because my phone was glitching. But come on. Brian isn't stupid. He probably started suspecting long before I realized it. When he finally did find out, it was because I messed up. I forgot to delete my text with Mike. It was such a stupid mistake, but it happened. Brian checked my phone and there it all was, every conversation, every plan to meet up, all of it. I don't even know how long he sat there going through it before he confronted me. But when he did, I could see the heartbreak in his eyes. We had a long, painful conversation that night. I couldn't deny it anymore. He laid it all out there and I had nothing to defend myself with. Brian's always been clear that cheating is a deal breaker for him. He made that known from the beginning of our relationship, but there I was begging and pleading, promising that I'd change and never do it again. I told him I'd give him full access to my phone, my computer, everything I promised. I'd quit my job if that's what it took. I even brought up couples counseling, something I'd never thought I'd consider. I knew how big of a deal this was for Brian, and honestly I was shocked when he said he'd considered giving me a second chance. I thought for sure it was over. Part of me knew why he was hesitating. Maybe he was scared of starting over. Maybe he didn't want to break our family apart for the sake of the kids. Or maybe it was because he really truly loved me more than I ever realized, more than I probably ever deserved. He agreed to try for the kids, he said. Maybe we could make it work, even though I knew it was tearing him up inside. That weekend I deleted Mike's number from my phone, blocked him on everything, and cut off every possible way he could contact me. I spent the next 2 days trying to make things right with Brian. He was still hurt and angry. Of course, that kind of pain doesn't just go away overnight, but I felt like there was hope, like we might be able to work through it somehow. By Monday, things felt awkward but manageable. I decided I'd put in my 2 weeks' notice at work. Maybe I'd find a new job or even stay home with the kids for a while. Brian and I had talked about me being a stay-at-home mom before, so that felt like a real possibility. It was a way to start fresh away from Mike and give my full attention to repairing our marriage. That Monday, Mike didn't come into work. I was relieved. I thought maybe he got the message and decided to leave me alone. But on Tuesday he showed up and he was furious. During our break he cornered me. His face was red, his hands shaking with anger. He demanded to know why I had blocked him, why I wasn't responding to him anymore. When he threatened to tell my husband everything, I told him it was too late. Brian already knew. Mike was stunned for a moment, like he didn't believe it. I explained that Brian and I had talked and that I was doing everything I could to save my marriage. I made it clear that whatever we had was over and there was no going back, but Mike wouldn't hear it. He said it didn't matter, that we could still be together secretly or that I could leave Brian for him. He kept pushing, saying we could figure something out, but I refused. I told him straight up that there was no way I was leaving my husband for him, and that we were done. I asked him if we could at least be civil at work until I left, so things wouldn't be too uncomfortable, but Mike wasn't having any of it. That's when he said it. He told me he was going to take care of my husband, that Brian wouldn't be a problem for us anymore. The second those words left his mouth, I knew what he meant. He was planning to intimidate Brian, maybe even beat him up. Mike was convinced that if he scared Brian enough, he could force him out of the picture. I tried to tell him to stop, to back off, but he wouldn't listen. He had this twisted idea in his head that he could win me over by getting rid of Brian. What Mike didn't know, what no one ever knew, was that Brian wasn't the pushover. He seemed to be sure he was skinny and quiet, and he didn't look like much on the surface. But what people didn't realize was that Brian had a crazy amount of strength behind those skinny arms he used to box back in college, and he was good, like really good. No one ever floored him, no matter how tough they were. I tried to warn Mike. I told him that Brian wasn't someone to mess with, that he was stronger than he looked, but Mike just laughed it off like I didn't know what I was talking about. He was too arrogant, too full of himself to take me seriously. And that's when everything spiraled out of control. Of course, Mike soon found out I was right that afternoon at work. I was on edge the entire time, nervous about what might happen, but there was a small part of me, one that I desperately clung to, that hoped Mike would come to his senses, that maybe he was just trying to scare me. I prayed he'd drop the whole idea and back off, that he'd come to his senses before doing something stupid. But by the end of the day, as I clocked out and headed home, that uneasy feeling in my gut only grew stronger. My kids were with my sister, and I planned to pick them up later once Brian was home, so we could spend some family time together. We needed that. It was just about an hour later, as I was preparing to grab the kids, that I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it and my heart sank. It was Mike. He told me he was on his way to my house to take care of Brian. Panic shot through me. I felt cold all over without thinking. I told my sister I couldn't take the kids just yet and sped home as fast as I could. I was driving recklessly, breaking every speed limit, desperate to get there before things got out of hand. But when I arrived, it was already starting. Mike was there trying to intimidate Brian, shoving him, trying to get in his face. I froze. My brain was screaming at me to do something to stop it, but I didn't. I just stood there watching, and honestly, I wasn't scared for Brian. I knew he could handle himself. I knew Mike was outmatched. Hell, part of me even thought Mike deserved what was coming to him. Mike was arrogant. He thought he could walk into my home and threaten my husband like that. He'd ignored every warning I gave him, so I just stood there as it all went down. It started with Mike pushing Brian, trying to throw the first punch, but Brian, as I'd predicted, didn't take any of it. In a blur of motion, he descended on Mike. His years of boxing training kicked in, and he tore into him one punch after another. Mike didn't stand a chance. He was getting pummeled and I did nothing. I just watched. Brian's face was a mix of anger, disgust, and oddly, disappointment. It was like he couldn't believe this was the guy I had been cheating with. I could almost hear his thoughts. This is the best you could do. Brian didn't stop. He kept going until Mike was nothing but a crumpled mess on the floor. Blood was pooling around him, and he was barely conscious. It was brutal. Brian's anger was more than just about Mike. It was about me too. He didn't say anything, but that look he gave me said it all. How could I betray him for someone like Mike? And he was right. Mike wasn't better than Brian in any way. That mattered. He was just the first person to show me attention outside of my marriage, and I fell for it pathetically, so it was stupid, all of it. After Brian was done, he stood over Mike, panting, fists still clenched, and told me to call an ambulance. He didn't even look at me when he said it. He just left, telling me he was going to pick up the kids from my sisters. He didn't wait for me to say anything, so I called 911, told them what happened, and waited for the paramedics to come. When they arrived, they loaded Mike into the ambulance and I grabbed his phone. Thankfully, it didn't have a password. I called his family, let them know he was at the hospital, but I didn't stay. I didn't want to deal with his family. I didn't want to explain why Mike was in the hospital or what had happened. I just left. When I got home, Brian wasn't there. I texted him asking where he was, and he told me he had taken the kids to his parents' house. They'd be staying the night there. Then he said something that hit me like a ton of bricks. He didn't think we could work on us anymore. He admitted that he had been wrong to even think about giving me a second chance. He said the whole thing with Mike had opened his eyes, and now he could see that staying together for the sake of the kids wasn't a good idea. He didn't want them. Growing up with a flawed idea of love or relationships, I was stunned. I knew our marriage had taken a massive hit, but I didn't think he would give up so soon. I thought we had a chance. But Brian made it clear that he couldn't forgive me, and that he didn't want to keep pretending we could fix something that was already broken. It's been a few days now. Brian and the kids are back at home, but it's different. It's quiet, awkward. He barely speaks to me, and when he does, it's just about logistics. He wants me to move out. We went apartment hunting the other day, and he's already contacted a divorce lawyer. As for Mike, he's still in the hospital. I haven't heard much about his condition, and honestly, I don't care. I haven't even been checking for updates. I've distanced myself completely from that part of my life. It's over. Mike is over, but my marriage, that's a whole other story. I don't know if there's anything left to salvage. Now I'm just left here wondering if there's anything I can do to fix it, but maybe there is an update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. So, yeah, I got rightfully roasted here and I deserved every bit of it. I don't think I realized just how messed up everything was until I started reading through the comments. A lot of you were brutal, some of it really stung. But honestly, some of the comments made me laugh too, as ironic as that is. The truth is, I've been like a zombie these past few days, completely devastated and lost. But after hearing what you all had to say, I've come to terms with the fact that there really isn't anything I can do to fix this. A lot of people said I needed to just let it go, and you're right. You were all baffled that I even thought there was a chance to make things right. You're right again. Some of you even cheered Brian, on which honestly same, he did what he had to do and Mike absolutely deserved it. No regrets there. A few of you asked for an update. So here it is. It's been a couple of days since everything went down and I've finally come to my senses. I told Brian that I would move out. We've been apartment hunting so I can get my own place. Brian was calm about it, and even though things are awkward between us, he said he would handle explaining everything to the kids. I'm honestly relieved about that because Brian's always been so good at talking to them. He's the type of dad that can explain tough things in a way they can understand. It's one of the many things I've always admired about him. We also split our joint account. Brian had saved up way more than I ever did, no surprise there, so we divided it accordingly. He took about 70% and I got the rest, which I think was fair. I'm okay with that. It's not like I've been contributing as much as I should have anyway. We're just in the process now of trying to find an apartment that I can afford on my own. I don't want a roommate or anything like that. I want a space where the kids can visit me without feeling like they're intruding on someone else's life. I need a place that's mine where I can rebuild and try to figure out what my life looks like. After all this, a few people asked why I don't just move in with my sister and trust me. I've thought about it. She's been incredibly supportive through all of this. She actually offered to let me stay with her. But the thing is, she has a family of her own. I love her, but I would never impose on her like that. She's got her hands full already, and honestly, I need my own space to work through everything. It wouldn't be fair to her or her family for me to move in and disrupt their life. As for my parents, that's ANGO. I know if I moved back in with them, they'd never let me live this down. My mom would harp on me for the rest of my life about how I ruined my marriage, and my dad, well, he'd probably just sit there silently judging me. They're toxic and I don't need that kind of energy around me right now, so moving in with them is off the table. So here I am trying to navigate this new chapter of my life. It's weird and it's hard and I'm still not sure where to go from here. But at least I've accepted that this is the reality I've created and I'm doing what I can to move forward. I'm still figuring out what that even means. But for now I'm focused on finding a place, getting settled and working through the mess I've made. Thanks for the reality check, Reddit. I needed it. Update, hey, Reddit. It's me again. It's been a couple of weeks and I've been swamped with everything. So I apologize for the delay in updating. But yeah, I do have a bit of an update now. First off, I'm currently job searching. My 2 weeks at my old job are officially over, and there's no way I'm going back. Even though Brian and I are no longer together, it just doesn't feel right being in that environment anymore. But I'm staying optimistic. I've already got a couple of interviews lined up for next week, so fingers crossed something works out soon. I'm hopeful. The biggest update. I finally moved out. I've got my own apartment now. It's small, really small, but it's a nice space and honestly, I'm just grateful to have a place that's all mine. It feels like a fresh start in some ways, even though it's been a roller coaster to get here.